Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the new album from Enrique Iglesias, titled Sex and Love. So okay, back in the 90s, after grunge faded out way too early, pop music went through something of an identity crisis in terms of what sort of music would chart. Pop punk, swing dance, the ska revival, Europop, boy bands, new metal, adult alternative, post-grunge, and all manner of other genres competing in that swirl for cultural dominance. It was a swirling mess of confusion that led to all manner of one-hit wonders and acts that would fizzle out rather dramatically in the early 2000s when the charts got a whole lot darker and a whole lot angrier. And one of those crazes in the late 90s of that particular time was the Latin revival, and leading the charge was Enrique Iglesias. Son of Julio Iglesias, one of the most successful Latin acts of all time, Enrique broke onto English radio after two well-received Spanish albums thanks to the recommendations of Gerardo. And for a brief few years, Enrique Iglesias' fusion of Latin romance and high-energy dance tracks, they were a pretty potent force on the pop charts. And I'll admit, I bought it. The production had a lot of flavor and style and energy. Enrique's sincerity and passion overcame some of the more questionable lyrics, and the man did have some real charisma. Enrique Iglesias has made some killer songs that I still enjoy to this day, and you know what? I'm not going to apologize for it. I really liked it. But unfortunately, the pop charts have always been fickle, and a few years later, Enrique Iglesias' career on English radio seemed to sputter out. His 2007 album went nowhere, even though he was experimenting with a darker style, and even critics who had supported him at that time weren't exactly fond of that album. So in 2010, he continued his reinvention from the smooth Latin lover into more of the club VIP, and thanks to collaborations with the other reinvented Latin artist Pitbull, he managed to leap back into the spotlight. But this time, however, I wasn't really on board. The love-struck sincerity seemed a lot less genuine now, and coupled with lyrics that were worse than ever in songs like Tonight I'm Loving You, or I Like It, or Dirty Dancer, and an abundance of sterile modern club production that sucked away his humanity, I was just about done with Enrique Iglesias. So to be honest, I wasn't looking forward to covering this new album, Sex and Love. Every step towards a rougher club dance sound has made Enrique's music seem to get worse, and considering the initial buzz on this album was that it was sleazier than ever, I expected the absolute worst here. So what did I get? Well, to be honest, this album was actually a little bit better than I expected, and I ended up enjoying chunks of Sex and Love a lot more than I thought I would. Now, let me stress, this album is far from great. In fact, the record really is a gigantic mess that fails more often than it succeeds, and there are huge flaws with it, but I do see improvement here, and there's some good ideas. Nothing that's gonna save this album so much as bump it up to a passing grade in my books, so take that what it's worth. Now, some of you are probably wondering, well, how can he say this album is a gigantic mess and still find redeeming qualities for it? Well, part of it is linked to the time frame in which this record was made, which took over 3 years of production, and you can tell. There are songs that would sound out of place on the radio, well, right now, but they would fit in fine in 2011, and they have some decent flavor all on their own. Now, the fun fact about the instrumentation on a lot of Enrique Iglesias' better songs is that they tend to be driven by guitar, and on this record, we get a pretty broad selection of guitar tones that Enrique Iglesias chooses to utilize, from Spanish guitar on Bailando to a reggae-esque riff on There Goes My Baby. And when you have guitar driving your pop song, you tend to get a more melodic focus, and I like that. Now, that's not saying there aren't problems with the instrumentation and production on this record. The pop dubstep crunch of Heart Attack and the squealing borderline chipmunk voice effects on Still Your King, they're in their own brand of overproduced awful, but look, I don't blame Enrique for that. Nope, I blame the Cataracts, a production team you can blame for all manner of terrible songs over the past 3 years. They have never made a song I've liked, and they have been responsible for really doing a lot of damage to some overall albums that had more potential. And while they do bring a little bit more flavor to their production here than on previous albums, the production only ever rises to bland at best in my books, and the worst part of it all is that Enrique got for almost half of this album. On top of that, his guest stars are a real mixed bag too. It's a worrying sign for music critics when Pitbull has 3 collaborations on this record, and even only on one of them he rises above pure horny idiocy. Flo Rida is not much better, and while J-Lo, she's passable here, I get the feeling feeling that anyone could have done her verse. Now, the two performers who did actually deliver well were Decimar Bueno and Jonte de Zona on Belando, mostly because they brought in a lot of vocal flavor and personality, and they didn't exactly embarrass themselves. And you know what? I'd be remiss to mention that Kylie Minogue shows up for Beautiful. And while I have warmed to it over the past few days and additional listens through her album Kiss Me Once, I can't exactly get over that the song is still overproduced, the auto-tune should have been excised altogether, and really that the song was a better fit over on Kylie's record that I reviewed a few days ago. But believe it or not, it's not the instrumentation or the production that really makes this album feel messy to me. No, that comes down to Enrique Iglesias himself and the bizarre split that comprises most of this record. For about half of this album, it sticks with club hookup songs that were played out a couple of years ago and really come across as sleazy. Now, some of you are inevitably complaining in the comments saying, "What, Mark, you like hair metal, and you like crunk, and you like Kesha. Why the hell would you rip on Enrique for getting his freak on?" Well, I've always said that there's two things you need to pull off sleazy music well. You need charisma, and you need a modicum of self-awareness. And honestly, this is where Enrique has improved a bit. He seems that he's a little bit more aware that he needs to be that swaggering alpha male on some of these tracks. And he's arguably a little bit better at it, or at least seems to be having more fun, and that can redeem the songs. Now, that being said, anytime he steps into this vein on a breakup song like Heart Attack or the absolutely terrible Still Your King, the mixture of smug arrogance and overwrought delivery don't exactly win him any points, especially considering when he's not exactly a nuanced enough songwriter to pull off this sort of material without coming across like an entitled asshole. But at his best here, while the material can be amazingly dumb, it's still fun in a shallow, debauched sort of way. That is, until you listen to songs like Bailando, or Loco, or Only a Woman, or hell, even Beautiful, where Enrique seems to be a lot more of his natural element with a smooth, heartfelt Latin pop singer. When the production supports him here, I'm reminded of the Enrique Iglesias that I used to really like. This is the Enrique that feels real to me, and thus the problem here is that the two visions of the singer, a dichotomy that he helpfully illustrates in the album title, is that both these images undercut each other. I don't really buy the smooth ladies man that Enrique would behave like such a brang alpha male douchebag on some of these songs, and I really don't buy Club VIP Enrique would treat women with a heartfelt honesty and a hunt for true love and not just like another one-night stand. I get the feeling that there is something of a middle ground that he's trying to pursue here, and the point where he gets closest to on this album is Bailando, but then again, that song is entirely in Spanish, and since I don't really speak Spanish, it might just be because I couldn't understand the lyrics. Then again, I went back and I checked through Google Translate, and honestly, even the Spanish songs that I wasn't as big of a fan of on this album, they are, from that rough translation, they've got more poetry, and they seem to be a little bit better written. So okay, in the end, I gotta be honest, I'm a little bit confused about how I should feel about this album. Putting aside the songs produced by the Cataracts, which are at best mediocre, this album isn't that bad. I like some of the melodic flair and the instrumentation, and when they let Enrique sound more raw and vulnerable and passionate, it's still an element that he can play very well. I still don't think he's a great songwriter, and it hurts him even on his better songs on this album, but you know what? He's developing a more varied presence and more charisma as a performer, and I completely understand why he has his massive audience and fan base, especially in Latin America. So in the end, I'm giving this album a 6 out of 10 and a recommendation, but only for about half of this album, with a preference more towards some of the Spanish songs, which feel more relaxed, comfortable, and you know what? Genuinely better than most of his recent English work. Sometimes, Enrique, you should stick to what you know, rather than try to be someone that you're really not. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. If there's anything I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or if there's any other albums you'd like me to cover in coming weeks, I'd be more than happy to take a listen. So until then, I'm Mark, and I'll see you next time.